Picture this, right? You are straddling a literal controlled explosion that's generating, I don't know, somewhere between 130 and 200 horsepower.
Yeah, just an absurd amount of power right between your legs.
Exactly. And it's a brisk Tuesday morning. You're roasting your legs in 90-degree heat coming straight off the engine casing. You're hunched over the fuel tank in this position that was, specifically engineered for a Grand Prix racetrack.
Right, definitely not engineered for comfort.
No, not at all. Your lower back is already starting to complain, and you're literally just trying to get to a 9 a.m. marketing meeting.
It's such a wild contrast, honestly, because when we usually talk about the daily commute, there's this underlying expectation of convenience, right? Like an appliance.
Yeah, exactly, like a toaster.
Right. You get into your car, the climate control kicks on to exactly 72 degrees, the sound system connects seamlessly to your playlist, and you just sort of float down the highway in this heavily insulated, isolated bubble.
But then you step into the world of high-performance motorcycles. Specifically, the idea of taking a track weapon, so we're talking about bikes like a Kawasaki ZX6R, a Yamaha R1, or a Suzuki GSX-R, and actually using it to weave through gridlock to get to the office.
And suddenly that comfortable, predictable bubble isn't just popped, it's completely violently shattered.
It really is. So, welcome. That brings us to the core of today's deep dive. Our mission today is to answer a fiercely debated question for you, the listener. And that question is, can you realistically, practically, and safely use an aggressive 600cc to 1000cc superbike as your daily commuter?
Which is a huge question.
It is, because we wanted to get past the romanticized idea of it, and actually look at the hard data and the lived experiences. So we've pulled together this incredibly diverse stack of research today.
We got a lot to cover.
We really do. We're looking at the definitive 2025 sport and hypersport motorcycle tire test conducted by PS Magazine. We're digging into the gritty details of street bike maintenance schedules from Lookover. And we're also examining some genuinely sobering physiological data on hearing loss from Bennett's.
That hearing loss data is, well, we'll get into it, but it's eye-opening.
Absolutely. And on top of that, we're breaking down the physics of riding backpacks from Ride Adventures and balancing all of this technical stuff with raw, unfiltered testimonials from everyday riders on Reddit and the Run That City blog.
The juxtaposition here is what makes this topic so fascinating to me. Because riding a track-ready machine to work, it sounds like the ultimate childhood dream, right?
Oh, totally. You picture yourself carving through city streets, hitting every apex perfectly, living like a MotoGP racer while, everyone else is just stuck in their gray boxes.
Right, but the reality hits hard and fast. The ergonomics just punish your wrists, the running costs are staggering, and the heat can literally be unbearable.
So let's unpack this. Before we even get into the technical wizardry of, suspension setups and tire chemistry, we have to establish the foundational reality of what it actually feels like to ride one of these machines daily.
Yeah, the lived experience.
Right. And looking through the Reddit threads and the Run That City testimonials, the views aren't just mixed, they are completely polarized.
You're looking at two entirely different psychological approaches to the exact same commute. You have this massive divide between riders who believe it's like the only way to start the day and those who consider it a form of medieval torture.
Let's look at the extremes here. So on one side, we have a writer on Reddit going by BB199123. This person commutes 40 miles every single day.
40 miles?
40 miles. And they used to do it on a Kawasaki ZX6R, which is already an incredibly aggressive 600cc super sport. And now they've upgraded and do it on a Yamaha R1, a literal litter bike.
Which is a massive physical commitment. 40 miles on an R1 in daily traffic, that is a machine with a chassis built to win Superbike World Championships.
Right, it's not a commuter.
No, the geometry is incredibly steep. It's designed for razor-sharp turn-in on a perfectly smooth track, not for navigating pothole-ridden urban sprawl, and yet this rider is purposefully choosing it over a comfortable car.
Because their take is that despite dealing with endless traffic lights and an engine that needs to warm up, taking the Superbike makes the commute fun instead of just a soul-crushing chore.
But then you flip the coin.
Right. You flip it and you find user Dilcock who just flat out advises against it. They used an R6 for commuting and their exact words were, "I no longer have that R6. Can't recommend it, man."
Which is telling.
Very. When you dig into the specific pain points mentioned across Run That City and these forums, you really start to see the clash between track engineering and city infrastructure.
Yeah, the urban environment exposes every single compromise a superbike makes in the pursuit of pure performance.
First up is fuel efficiency. Or, well, the severe lack of it. We're talking about getting maybe 30 miles per gallon if you're lucky. But the bigger issue, the one that comes up over and over again, is the heat.
Oh, the engine heat is legendary.
One writer detailed how these litter bikes run so incredibly hot in traffic that they essentially bake your inner thighs. And the iMotorbike Guide on Overheating explains the exact mechanics of why this happens. It's basically all about thermal dynamics at 0 miles per hour.
Right, because a modern liquid-cooled Superbike engine is this absolute marvel of thermal engineering. But it comes with a major caveat. These engines are producing massive amounts of horsepower from very small displacements.
Which means a ton of friction.
Exactly. Staggering amounts of friction and heat. So to deal with this, they have these large curved radiators designed to capture massive volumes of air being forced through them at really high speeds.
Like when you're on a track.
Right. When you're going 80 or 150 miles per hour on a track, the natural airflow is tremendous. The cooling system is highly efficient. But when you are stuck in stop-and-go traffic moving at 5 miles per hour, that ram air effect drops to absolute zero.
You're just sitting on a high compression furnace. I mean, the water pump is circulating coolant, sure, but there's no air moving over the radiator fins to actually pull the heat away.
This system is suddenly relying entirely on a small, electrically powered radiator fan. And while that fan can prevent the bike from boiling over immediately, it is in no way designed to compensate for stationary, idling conditions over a long period.
Yeah, the iMotorbike piece points out that this frequent idling just prevents the engine from cooling efficiently. The heat has to go somewhere.
And unfortunately, it radiates straight up through the frame, through the gas tank, and right into the rider's legs.
Yeah, it sounds genuinely miserable. You're sweating through your gear, baking your legs, getting terrible gas mileage, and on top of that, the aggressive riding position is physically exhausting.
You're in an aerodynamic tuck at 10 miles an hour.
Exactly. You're hunched over the tank, your body weight is pressing down onto your wrists because the clip-on handlebars are mounted incredibly low, and your neck is craned upward just so you can see the bumper of the minivan in front of you.
It's a recipe for cramps, honestly.
Which makes me ask, if it's this uncomfortable, why are so many people still doing it? I mean, beyond just wanting to look cool.
Well, a significant part of the practical answer lies in the physical dimensions of the motorcycles themselves, specifically regarding how they move through congested spaces.
Oh, right. Lane splitting. Or, filtering, depending on where you live.
Yes. Superbikes have a distinct advantage in heavy traffic because of those low, narrow clip-on handlebars we just mentioned. If you look at a wide touring bike, an adventure bike, or like a big cruiser, their handlebars can be 3 feet wide.
Yeah, they're huge.
But a superbike is incredibly narrow. In places where lane splitting is legal and culturally accepted, a ZX6R is like a scalpel. You have the blistering acceleration to instantly exploit gaps in traffic and the narrow aerodynamic profile to slip between side view mirrors that would completely trap a larger motorcycle.
Okay, I get the physical size advantage. They fit through tight spaces. But how do you actually manage the throttle? You're talking about a machine with 130 to over 200 horsepower, and you're trying to weave between cars at 20 miles per hour. I mean, a millimeter of throttle twist on a track bike usually means you're launching forward.
It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
But we found a really interesting strategy for taming these bikes from Neil McKenzie, a former Grand Prix racer over at Visordown.
Yeah, his approach is highly pragmatic and completely counterintuitive to how you'd ride the bike on a track. He strongly advocates for short shifting.
Let's explain short shifting for the listener, just to be clear. Normally on a track, you ring the engine out right, you shift right before the red line to stay in the peak power band.
Right. Short shifting means you click up into the next gear way early, at very low RPMs.
Exactly. Modern 1000cc superbikes produce an immense amount of torque. McKinsey points out that the engines are so powerful you can literally click an R1 up into 6th gear while only doing 20 or 30 miles per hour and just ride it like a twist-and-go scooter.
Wow, 6th gear at 20 miles per hour.
Yeah. By purposefully keeping the engine revolutions incredibly low, you flatten out the power delivery. It becomes much smoother, much softer, and significantly safer. You eliminate that aggressive, jerky throttle response that would make 1st or 2nd gear absolutely terrifying in tight traffic.
He also gets into the psychological aspect of the commute. He uses this fantastic analogy of treating the road like a video game.
It's a perfect framework for situational awareness. He advises treating every potential hazard, so intersections, patches of gravel, police cars, sudden rain, drivers on their cell phones as space invaders.
They are actively out to get you.
Right. and your job is to anticipate their movements.
It demands hypervigilance. You can't zone out like you can in a car with lane keep assist and cruise control.
No, and this hypervigilance ties directly into the physics of handling the motorcycle. He places a massive emphasis on keeping the bike as upright as possible during any hard acceleration.
Why is that so critical?
Well, it's about the contact patch. The tire's contact patch. The actual amount of rubber touching the asphalt is roughly the size of a credit card.
Just a credit card.
Yeah, that's it. So the more upright the motorcycle is, the larger and more stable that contact patch is. If you are leaned over navigating a tight city corner and you aggressively apply the throttle on a damp street, the rear tire is going to spin up and you will crash.
Right, because there's less rubber on the road.
Exactly. Maximizing that contact patch by standing the bike up before getting on the gas is the key to safety when you have race-level power at your right wrist.
I have to pause here, though, and push back on this whole premise for a second. Let's look at the logical math of what we've just laid out.
Okay, let's hear.
One of the Reddit users we found literally chimed in and said, just buy a 125 400cc scooter. It's easier to handle, it has no gears to shift in traffic, and it has massive underseat storage for your laptop.
It's a valid point.
Right. If a superbike is roasting your legs, burning expensive gas, forcing you into a painful aerodynamic tuck, and you have to artificially neuter it by short shifting into sixth gear at 20 off throttle just to keep from crashing, isn't commuting on one like driving a Formula One car to the grocery store. It just seems completely fundamentally irrational.
From a purely utilitarian perspective, you are 100% correct. It is entirely irrational. A scooter is the objectively superior urban commuting tool. But motorcycles, and superbikes in particular, are almost never purchased purely for logic.
They're emotional purchases.
Completely emotional. There's a specific quote from that Reddit thread that perfectly captures this psychology. The rider who was complaining about the 30 mPa fuel efficiency and the searing heat on their legs followed all of that up by saying, all those negatives, but when that tachometer needle sweeps past 8, none of them matter. Litter bikes are so much fun.
When that needle sweeps past 8,000 RPM, that single moment is the entire payoff.
It alters the perception of the commute. It transforms a mundane chore into a highly visceral event.
Wow.
For that specific rider, the 3 or 4 seconds of pure, unadulterated, gravity-defying acceleration when the road finally opens up completely makes up for 30 minutes of sweating and stop-and-go traffic. It's a raw, engaging experience that a practical scooter simply cannot deliver.
So, assuming you're that rider, right? You've made the irrational, emotional choice to take this track-ready machine out into the urban jungle every day. If you're going to do it, you have to set the bike up right. And the absolute most critical decision you'll make, the foundational layer of your safety, is what connects that 130 horsepower machine to the pavement.
The rubber? The tires are absolutely everything.
Let's dive deep into the great tire debate. Because when you buy a superbike off the showroom floor, it almost always comes equipped with Sport tires. These are track-oriented, ultra-sticky tires. But the research strongly suggests that leaving those on for your daily morning commute might actually be a dangerous mistake.
We really need to establish the critical distinction between the two major categories here: sport tires versus hypersport tires.
Yeah, the naming conventions sound similar, but their chemical engineering and intended use cases are miles apart.
To break this down, we're looking at a massive, exhaustive 2025 tire test conducted by PS Magazine. And they took this incredibly seriously. They went to the Goodyear and Dunlop premier testing facility in southern France.
Oh, wow, that's a serious testing ground.
Yeah, and they used a BMW S1000RR as their test mule, which is an absolute monster of a litter bike. But here is the most important variable of the entire test. They conducted these runs in weather between 14 and 18 degrees Celsius.
Which translates to roughly 57 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit.
Exactly. That is a typical, slightly chilly morning commute for a lot of people. It is not a 95-degree, scorching hot summer day at the racetrack.
And that temperature window changes the physics of how rubber behaves entirely, right?
Completely. Let's look at how these tires are engineered. Hypersport tires are built primarily for the racetrack. The rubber compounds they use rely heavily on carbon black. They have very minimal tread grooves, what we call a low void ratio, to put as much raw, uninterrupted rubber on the road as possible. They also feature incredibly stiff carcasses.
The stiff carcass is to handle extreme lean angles and the massive forces of heavy trail breaking into corners, right?
Yes, exactly. They are engineered to provide maximum possible grip in dry conditions. But here is the catch. That carbon black compound has a very high glass transition temperature. It requires significant heat to become pliable and sticky. Until a Hypersport tire reaches its optimal operating temperature, it feels hard, almost like riding on wooden hoops.
That sounds sketchy.
It is. Now, sport tires, on the other hand, are engineered for the realities of the street. They use high silica compounds. Silica allows the rubber to remain pliable and flexible at much lower temperatures. They also feature deeper, more prevalent tread patterns designed specifically to evacuate water.
And the results of the PS Magazine test in those 60-degree temperatures were genuinely shocking. I mean, they pitted 6 premium sport tires against 6 premium hypersport tires. You'd normally assume the hypersports, being the more aggressive, racier tire, would dominate the performance metrics.
But they didn't. The overall winner of the entire multi-day test was a sport tire.
The Dunlop Sportsmart MK4 took the crown. A sport tire beat out the track-focused hypersports. The reviewers were blown away by its cold-running behavior. Because of that silica compound, it was pliable and ready to grip almost the second it rolled out of the driveway.
Right, no warm-up needed.
It offered precise turn-in, but where it absolutely humiliated the hypersport category was in the wet conditions. It clocked the fastest wet lap of the entire test at 72.64 seconds.
To really understand how significant that is, you have to look at how the Hypersport tires behaved in the exact same water. The Continental Race Attack 2 Street, which is a pure Hypersport tire, was labeled the most water-shy tire in the bunch. Its wet lap time was 84.30 seconds.
That's almost a 12-second difference on a single lap.
It's massive.
In the world of motorcycle testing, a 12-second gap is an eternity. It means the rider is barely holding on, just tiptoeing around the corners. The testers also evaluated the Dunlop Sportsmart TT, another Hypersport tire, and their official advice to riders was literally to forget it if the roads get wet.
Though we should be fair to the Hypersport category, they did excel where they were supposed to. In the purely dry handling test, the Pirelli Supercorsa SB-V4 took the win with a 79.82-second lap.
Okay, so they still win in the dry.
Yeah, the test riders praised its stiff carcass, noting it provided incredibly transparent feedback. The rider could feel every nuance of what the contact patch was doing.
And we also saw the Michelin-powered GP2 perform impressively. It acted as a sort of hybrid, delivering that raw hypersport grip in the dry, but somehow managing to secure the second-best overall wet lap, which shows Michelin is doing some wild chemical engineering with their dual compound technologies.
But the broader essential takeaway for the listener is about aligning the equipment with the environment. The street is not a controlled track.
It makes me think of an analogy. If you put a pure hypersport tire on your ZX6R for a chilly 20-minute morning commute in October, it's like trying to spread a frozen, rock-hard stick of butter on a piece of toast.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. The butter is stiff, it won't yield, and it desperately needs heat to soften up. If you try to force it, you don't get a smooth spread, you just tear the bread to pieces. Whereas the modern sport tire is like room temperature butter. It's chemically pliable, flexible, and ready to go to work immediately right out of the fridge.
That's a phenomenal way to visualize it. Because what's crucial to understand about the daily commute is that you do not have the luxury of 2 warm-up laps to get your carbon black Hypersport tires up to 160 degrees.
You just don't have the time.
Right. When you pull out of your neighborhood and minivan unexpectedly runs a stop sign at the very first intersection, you need 100% of your braking grip right in that split second. A cold Hypersport tire simply cannot deform into the asphalt to provide that grip.
The frozen butter just slides across the toast.
Exactly. The front tire will lock up and you'll go down. What the PS Magazine test unequivocally proved is a monumental shift in modern tire technology. Today's premium sport tires like the Dunlop MK4, the Metzeler M9RR, or the Bridgestone S23 now possess mechanical grip reserves that are essentially impossible for a sane rider to fully utilize on public roads.
So they've gotten so incredibly good that the old logic of, I need a track tire to ride fast in the canyons, is just dead.
It's totally obsolete. 10 and 15 years ago, you could make a valid argument that you needed the sticky Hypersport rubber for maximum safety during aggressive weekend rides. Today, a silica-rich sport tire gives you the same race-level grip you'd have expected from a track tire a decade ago, but it combines it with the miraculous ability to handle a sudden afternoon rainstorm and 50-degree morning asphalt.
Wow.
For the daily commuter facing unpredictable weather, emergency stops, and varying road surfaces, the sport tire is objectively the superior, safer, and smarter choice.
Okay, so you've made the smart choice. You've got fresh Dunlop MK4s or Bridgestone S23s mounted on the wheels. But having the right chemistry in your tires means absolutely nothing if they aren't being pressed into the pavement correctly.
Very true. A tire is completely at the mercy of the suspension system controlling it. If the suspension isn't keeping the tire on the ground, you have zero grip.
Which naturally brings us to dialing in the ride and the rigorous mechanical maintenance schedule required to keep a highly strung superbike alive on the daily grind. This is where we venture into what a lot of riders consider the dark art of motorcycle setup, suspension geometry.
It can be intimidating, yeah.
Definitely. We leaned heavily on a phenomenal guide from Examoto to break this down, and it all starts with one crucial measurement: sag.
Sag is arguably the single most critical measurement on any motorcycle. It dictates the entire geometry of the bike, how it sits, how it steers, and how it absorbs kinetic energy from bumps.
The guide breaks it down into two types. First is static sag, which is simply how much the suspension compresses under the raw weight of the motorcycle alone, just sitting there doing nothing.
Right, just the bike's weight.
But the more important one for our commuter is rider sag. That's how much the suspension compresses when you, the actual human, get on it.
And measuring rider sag isn't just a matter of eyeballing it. It's a very specific mechanical process. As the XL Moto guide details, you first have to lift the wheels completely off the ground. You need to completely unload the springs to measure the suspension at full extension, basically taking a tape measure from the rear axle straight up to a fixed point on the tail fairing.
You definitely need a couple of friends and a rear stand to help with this. You can't really do it alone.
You really do. Once you have that baseline full extension number, you put the bike back on the ground. Then the rider puts on all their daily riding gear, so helmet, heavy leather jacket, boots, and whatever heavy backpack they commute with.
Because the weight has to be accurate to the commute.
Exactly. They sit on the bike in their normal riding position with their feet on the pegs while a friend balances the bike. Then you take that exact same measurement again. The difference between the fully extended measurement and the compressed measurement with the rider's weight is your rider sag.
And getting this millimeter measurement right affects literally everything about how the bike behaves. If it's wrong, a brilliant bike handles like a broken shopping cart.
Because sag alters two fundamental properties: spring rate and ride height. Think of the spring rate as how much force is required to compress the spring 1 inch. If your sag is too little, meaning the bike barely compresses when you sit on it, the spring is effectively too stiff. The ride becomes harsh, and the tire will skip over bumps.
And if there's too much sag?
If there's too much sag, the spring is too soft. The bike will wallow in corners, and it will aggressively dive forward under heavy braking, changing the steering angle and making the bike really unstable.
Here's the counterintuitive part, though. For anyone who thinks they need a track setup for the street, the XL Moto Guide points out that for the daily street commuter, you actually want significantly softer suspension settings than a track racer.
It's all about energy absorption. A racetrack is a controlled environment, right? The asphalt is smooth and uniform. A track rider wants ultra-stiff suspension so that every ounce of their steering input goes directly into the tire, and the chassis doesn't flex.
But public roads are chaotic.
Exactly. They are filled with potholes, manhole covers, frost heaves, and expansion points. If your Superbike suspension is set to track stiff, every time you hit a pothole, the suspension won't compress to absorb the impact. Instead, that violent kinetic energy transfers straight into the chassis, launching the motorcycle upward.
So the bike literally bounces.
Yes. For that split second, your tire is literally airborne. It loses contact with the road. You want softer settings with more sag to allow the suspension to travel, absorbing those imperfections so the tire remains planted on the asphalt.
Okay, so you've done the math, you've tuned the suspension, the tires are perfectly planted. Now you have to maintain the heart of the beast, the engine. And looking at the Lookover street bike maintenance schedule, keeping a litter bike happy is not a casual commitment.
Not at all. A Superbike engine is a high-strung, precision-engineered thoroughbred. It operates at incredibly high RPMs with very tight tolerances. It requires meticulous, obsessive care.
Let's run through the numbers because they come at you fast. Oil changes are mandated every 4,000 to 6,000 miles. But the guide notes that if you take it to a track day on the weekend, pushing it to redline repeatedly, that interval drops drastically to every 1,000 to 2,000 miles, or honestly, right after the track weekend is over.
And here is a trap that catches a lot of new riders. You cannot just go to the local auto parts store, grab whatever 10W40 oil is on sale, and pour it into your Kawasaki.
Right. The Lookover guide is emphatic about this. You must use JSO MA2 specified full synthetic oil. Do not use car oil.
This is a fascinating mechanical distinction. In almost all modern cars, the engine oil's only job is to lubricate the pistons, crankshaft, and valves. The transmission uses a separate fluid entirely. But most motorcycles, Superbikes included, use what's called a wet clutch.
Meaning the clutch is literally swimming in oil.
Yes. The clutch pack, which is a series of alternating steel and friction plates that connect the engine's power to the rear wheel, is housed inside the engine cases. It is bathed in the exact same oil that is lubricating the pistons.
I honestly didn't realize they shared the exact same fluid reservoir. That changes everything.
It does chemically. Modern automotive oils are packed with advanced friction modifiers, additives designed to make the metal components slide against each other with as little resistance as possible to improve fuel economy.
Which sounds good for pistons, but bad for a clutch.
Exactly. If you put that slick, friction-modified car oil into a motorcycle with a wet clutch, those additives will do exactly what they were designed to do. They will coat the clutch plates, removing the friction. When you twist the throttle, the engine will scream to 12,000 RPM, but the clutch plates will just slip endlessly against each other. The bike won't accelerate.
Wow, so you just lose all drive.
Right. The JSO MA2 specification guarantees that the oil is engineered without those specific friction modifiers, allowing the clutch plates to grab and lock together properly under immense power.
That is such a brilliant, vital detail. The chemistry of the oil dictates the mechanical grip of the transmission, so the oil is sorted. The guide also heavily emphasizes tire pressure checks, recommending around 36 psi in the front and 42 psi in the rear for solo commuting. But it's not just about the pressure, it's about reading the wear patterns on the rubber.
The wear pattern on a motorcycle tire is basically a forensic record of how and where you ride.
Yeah, if you see the center of the tire flattening out, forming a hard edge, it means you're doing way too much upright, straight line highway commuting. But if the center is pristine and the edges are chewed up and balled with rubber, it means you're attacking canyon roads aggressively.
It tells the whole story.
It really does. And speaking of stopping after those aggressive runs, the brakes. The guide says to inspect the brake pads every 4,000 miles, but more importantly, to completely flush the DOT4 brake fluid every 2 years or 8,000 miles.
The brake fluid flush is critical, and it comes down to chemistry again. DOT4 brake fluid is highly hygroscopic. This means it actively absorbs moisture from the humidity in the air over time, even through the microscopic pores in rubber brake lines.
Why does water in the fluid matter? I mean, water is a liquid. It still pushes the brake calipers, right?
It does until it gets hot, and Superbike brakes get incredibly hot. The problem is the boiling point. Fresh DOT4 fluid has a very high boiling point to withstand the massive friction heat generated by the brake pads. But as the fluid absorbs water, its overall boiling point drops significantly.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, if you are doing heavy, repeated braking in stop-and-go traffic or trailing the brakes down a mountain road, that old, waterlogged fluid can easily reach its lowered boiling point. The water inside the fluid literally boils, turning into a gas.
And here's the physics problem. You can't compress a liquid, but you can easily compress a gas.
Exactly. This is called vapor lock. When you squeeze the brake lever, instead of that hydraulic pressure forcing the brake pads against the spinning rotor, the pressure just harmlessly compresses the gas bubbles in the line. Your brake lever suddenly pulls all the way back to the handlebar with zero resistance, and the motorcycle simply does not stop.
Which is terrifying. So bringing this all together, what does this massive list of sag measurements, oil chemistry, and fluid dynamics mean for the listener who wants to commute on a superbike?
If we synthesize all this data from XL Moto and look over, the overarching truth is that commuting on a ZX6R or an R1 is the furthest thing from a set-it-and-forget-it endeavor. You can't just put gas in it like a Honda Civic and ignore it for a year.
Right, it demands your attention.
It requires active, continuous, obsessive participation. You are entering into a mechanical partnership with the machine.
You really have to listen to it. You have to feel what it's doing beneath you.
Yes, the bike communicates its needs. If your suspension sag is off, the bike tells you by skipping over bumps. If you neglect to clean and lubricate your drive chain every 500 miles, it tells you with a horrible grinding vibration.
And if you use the wrong oil, the clutch slips.
Right. The bike fights back if neglected. It degrades rapidly. The meticulous maintenance schedule is simply the necessary cost of admission for that glorious moment when the tachometer needle sweeps past 8,000 RPM.
It's a labor of love. But here's the reality check. While you can tune the bike's suspension to absorb the road, and you can change the fluids to keep the engine from destroying itself, you also have to tune your own gear to handle the physical toll of the ride. We are transitioning from preserving the machine to preserving the human.
Which is just as important, because the environment you are moving through is hostile. Surviving it requires specific adaptations.
Exactly, because commuting on a superbike at highway speeds is an absolute assault on the human senses. Specifically, we need to dive deep into two major practicalities: surviving the noise and figuring out how to haul your gear. Let's start with the Bennett's data on hearing damage, because the numbers here are genuinely terrifying.
Hearing loss in the motorcycling community is an epidemic that is far too often ignored until the damage is permanent and irreversible.
The Bennett's article dives deep into the anatomy of the human ear to explain exactly how this happens. They start with the pinna, which is the visible outer cartilage of the ear that funnels sound. That sound travels down the canal and hits the eardrum, transferring vibrations to the middle ear bones, the malleus, impulsus, and stapes.
Their job is to amplify those vibrations.
Right. But the critical, fragile part of the system is the inner ear, specifically the cochlea.
The cochlea is a snail-shaped, fluid-filled structure. Inside it are tens of thousands of microscopic hair cells called stereocilia. Their job is to ride the fluid waves created by sound vibrations and convert that mechanical movement into electrical signals that the brain translates as sound.
And the Bennett's data points out a grim biological reality. Loud noises essentially blast these delicate hair cells like a hurricane flattening a forest. They get bent, broken, and eventually die. And the kicker, in humans, these stereocilia do not regrow. Ever.
Once those cells are dead, the specific frequency they were responsible for detecting is gone forever as a cumulative dosage of damage. It builds up ride after ride.
And then the dosage on a motorcycle is massive. We're not talking about the exhaust note either. ISVR Consulting at the University of Southampton conducted extensive studies and found that above 40 miles per hour, wind noise rushing over the helmet is significantly louder than the engine itself.
It's just a constant roar.
Yeah, by the time a rider hits 70 miles per hour on the highway, they are experiencing approximately 106 decibels of turbulent noise inside their helmet.
We need to contextualize 106 decibels because the decibel scale is logarithmic, not linear. Every increase of 3 decibels means the sound energy has actually doubled. 106 decibels is equivalent to standing next to a running chainsaw or a jackhammer.
And this is where the science becomes sobering. The safe exposure limit for 106 decibels, according to the British Tinnitus Association and occupational health standards, is just 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
Beyond that time frame, you are actively destroying those hair cells.
Wait, 3 minutes and 45 seconds? Most people's highway commute is at least 30 minutes each way.
Which means that without protection, the commuter is doing permanent, irreversible damage to their hearing every single morning and every single evening.
That is insane.
It really is. Buying a quiet, premium aerodynamic helmet helps reduce the buffeting, sure, but it does not solve the root problem. Wearing earplugs is not optional. It is biologically mandatory.
So what are the actual solutions here? Bennett's looked at a few distinct options. On the more accessible extreme, you have standard foam plugs, like the 3M EAR Soft FX. These things are incredibly dense and offer a massive 39 dB single number rating, or SNR. They essentially put a wall between you and the noise.
They are highly effective for sheer volume reduction, but they block everything equally. For commuting, many riders turn to custom or specialized filtered plugs. Brands like Oratec use tiny internal ceramic filters, while others like Ultimate Ear use acoustic channels.
These lower the overall volume but are engineered to allow specific high frequencies like human speech, car horns, and sirens to pass through the filter while trapping and deadening the low-frequency rumble of the wind.
It's acoustic engineering tailored directly for the rider.
I have to ask a serious safety question here, though. If I have foam earplugs crammed into my ears, blocking up to 39 decibels of sound, isn't that incredibly dangerous in a city?
It's a common fear, yeah.
I mean, how am I supposed to hear a car horn warning me or an ambulance siren approaching an intersection? Am I just riding completely deaf to the world around me?
It feels highly counterintuitive when you first think about it, but the physics of sound completely clarifies this concern. Let's look at the raw numbers. A standard emergency ambulance siren at a distance of 1 meter produces roughly 104 decibels of sound.
Okay, so very loud.
Very loud. Even if you have those maximum 39 dB foam plugs fully inserted, the siren is still hitting your eardrum at 65 decibels.
Which is roughly the volume of a normal loud conversation. It's still totally audible.
Exactly. It's well above the threshold of hearing. Furthermore, a siren operates at a much higher piercing pitch, a higher frequency than the low, droning, chaotic rumble of wind noise.
Okay, so they stand out more.
Yes. And if you are using those acoustically filtered plugs we mentioned, like the Pinlock or Earpiece M models highlighted in the Bennett's piece, they use constructive and destructive interference to specifically target and cancel out the low-frequency wind drum. They intentionally let the high-frequency sirens and horns pierce right through.
Oh, wow.
In reality, you actually hear emergency vehicles better and sooner with earplugs in because your brain isn't being overwhelmed and fatigued by the static, deafening roar of the wind.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. You're filtering the harmful static, not eliminating the necessary data from the world around you. So your hearing is protected. Now, how do you protect your back and actually carry your life to work? We have to talk about hauling gear. A Superbike is a minimalist machine.
Almost aggressively minimalist.
It has zero storage, no trunk, no panniers, usually barely enough room under the passenger seat for a registration card. You have to wear a backpack to carry your laptop and shoes.
And as the incredibly detailed Ride Adventures Guide points out, throwing your laptop into a traditional school backpack is going to fail you miserably and potentially dangerously on a sport bike.
Why do traditional shoulder straps fail so badly?
Think about the ergonomics we established earlier. You are leaned far forward on a Superbike, arms outstretched to the clip-ons. Traditional backpack straps pull backward directly against the front of your shoulders and armpits, restricting your range of motion.
And you need that motion.
Exactly. When you are fighting traffic and need to counter-steer quickly to avoid a space invader, you absolutely cannot have your gear binding your shoulders. Plus, there's an aerodynamic penalty. At highway speeds, the wind catches a normal backpack, lifting it up and pulling you backward like a parachute, straining your neck and lower back.
So what's the engineering alternative for riders?
Sternum harnesses.
Like the systems pioneered by USWE with their NDM no dancing monkey technology or the Kriega quadlock systems.
Precisely. These harness systems redesign how weight is carried. They move the load entirely off the front of your shoulders and distribute the weight evenly across your chest plate and down your back.
Oh, so it feels more like a vest.
Right. They use a central clipping mechanism that locks the bag securely to your torso so it doesn't shift or slide outward when you lean aggressively into a corner. Most importantly, they leave your arms and shoulders completely free to maneuver the motorcycle.
The Ride Adventures Guide breaks down the top bags using these systems. They highlight the RSD X Kriega ROAM 34. This thing is a beast. It holds 34 liters. It's constructed from highly abrasion-resistant waxed Cordura, and they crowned it the Commuter King because the roll top expands enough to actually swallow a full-face helmet.
Which is so convenient. Then there is the ClinTech pack, which is fascinating from a safety perspective because it integrates rider protection directly into the luggage itself.
Right. The Tech Pack features an integrated armored D30 chest panel built right into the sternum harness. D30 is incredible stuff. It's a non-Newtonian fluid polymer. It remains soft and flexible while you wear it, but upon sudden impact, the molecules lock together instantly to absorb the shock.
It's like futuristic armor.
It really is. So you are getting high-end chest protection by default just by wearing your backpack. And it solves a massive commuting headache with a built-in steel security cable, allowing you to lock the bag and your helmet directly to the bike's frame when you walk into the office.
It addresses the reality of arriving at your destination without wanting to carry 15 pounds of gear into a meeting.
And for riders on a stricter budget, they mention the Oxford Atlas B20. It's a 20-liter bag, fully waterproof with premium YKK AquaGuard zippers so your laptop won't drown in a rainstorm. It also features a universal strap system so it can double as a tail bag, strapping directly to the passenger seat if you want the weight completely off your body.
By meticulously combining these seemingly disparate elements, the acoustically filtered earplugs to prevent neurological fatigue and hearing loss, and a dynamic harness-style backpack that moves with the body rather than fighting it, the rider is physically adapting to the machine.
When you look at the big picture we've painted today, by combining the right versatile silica-rich sport tires for grip in any weather, dialing in the suspension with the exact millimeter of rider sag to absorb the broken city streets, maintaining the engine with JSO MA2 oil so the clutch hooks up perfectly, and protecting your body with filtered earplugs and specialized sternum harnesses. The rider has essentially hacked the Superbike.
Hacked it, yeah.
You are taking a hyper-aggressive, track-focused weapon and mutating it into a viable daily urban commuter.
You are systematically mitigating the machine's inherent hostility toward the urban environment, basically bending its performance to suit your needs.
It's an incredible mechanical and psychological journey we've been on today. To briefly pull all these threads together, We started by embracing the harsh physical demands of the Superbike commute, the engine heat, the cramped ergonomics, and the necessity of short shifting to tame the torque. We explored the deep chemistry of why choosing versatile sport tires like the Dunlop MK4 over sticky hypersport track rubber is an absolute lifesaver on cold, wet mornings.
So crucial.
We dove into the physics of obsessively managing rider sag, the chemical importance of friction modifiers in your oil, and finally, protecting your biological hardware with ceramic-filtered earplugs and non-Newtonian armor backpacks.
It requires a holistic, deeply engaged approach. You have to tune the motorcycle, upgrade your gear, and recalibrate your mindset all at once.
To you, the listener, making the choice to ride a superbike daily is not about ease. It's the opposite of the insulated car bubble. It is a deliberate, conscious choice to reject convenience in favor of raw engagement. It's about taking the long, fast, complicated way home, even if it requires infinitely more effort and maintenance.
It's about choosing to feel something over accepting numbness.
And that brings us to a final, slightly philosophical thought for you to mull over as we wrap up. We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing how to minimize and mitigate the discomforts of the superbike commute, how to manage the heat, block the wind noise, ease the heavy clutch pull, and carry your laptop without pain.
Yeah.
But what if?
What if those very discomforts are actually the motorcycle's greatest assets? If we look at the overarching trajectory of modern transportation, cars are rapidly becoming silent, autonomous, climate-controlled pods. They're designed to completely isolate us from the physical world. In a way, they're designed to put our brains to sleep.
Yeah.
Perhaps wrestling with a 130 horsepower, vibrating, heat-radiating machine at 7 a.m., physically feeling the texture of the road through the clip-ons, manually managing a wet clutch, and constantly scanning the horizon for hazards. Perhaps that is exactly the kind of visceral, demanding, hyper-present experience we desperately need. Maybe fighting that machine is what it takes to feel truly awake and truly alive before we surrender to sitting in a sterile, silent office chair for 8 hours.
Keep the rubber side down.